Fox Sports Radio with Ryan the Hockey Guy, weekdays at 3 p.m. Definitely check that out. And following the rules, social distancing in the break room, the guy responding to all of today's social media questions and comments, our intern and social media director,
The Wiz!
the only intern in the country with his own theme music. The show's also streaming live on the LV Sports Network. And if you're brave, you can see us on Facebook Live and on YouTube. The page is called Outta. That's Outtaline. You can also follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at OuttaLineFoxLV. That's OuttaLineFoxLV. And since the show is live, your calls are welcome. The Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio line is 702-876-1340.
Hi, this is Bubby, and it's time for What's on Tap.
Since March, I've been thinking about when are we finally going to have camp and start this, and then, and then it opens and I'm not there. So I was a little mad about that. But, I was fortunate to be in Vegas and have a lot of teammates skating with me for a few weeks prior. And, we still have a lot of practices here before playoff starts. And, it's just happy to be back and be around the team and be part of a team, right? And, ready to get this going.
If you're in Las Vegas and a hockey fan, you recognize that voice. And, that means hockey is back. That's Marc-Andre Fleury. What's on Tap? Sponsored by title sponsor Residential Bancorp. Whether purchasing a new home or refinancing the home you already own, Residential Bancorp is the company to turn to for all of your home financing needs. Residential Bancorp, funding America one neighborhood at a time. On Tap, sports, as we mentioned, are on the verge of coming back, and we'll be touching on all of them. Our guest today is Vegas Golden Knights insider Gary Lawless, talking about the Vegas Golden Knights, who are practicing at City National Arena and days away from departing for Edmonton. And there's a goalie battle going on, and we knew that was going to happen. And I think it's a great one. I think it's going to benefit the Knights. And, hey, they're both playing really well from what I understand. Gary will fill us in on that. Plus, we have S&B with C, and we'll kick the show off with a very strong Fact This. That's what's on tap. If you're looking to buy a home or refinance the home you already own, choose a company you can trust. Residential Bancorp, funding America one neighborhood at a time.
Fact this. If you don't like the facts, take your ass back to bed. Fact this.
Yeah, it's a fact. Not only will the Washington Redskins have a new name, but they will also have a new culture after a story in the Washington Post on Thursday revealed that 15 women have come forward and told about their experiences of sexual harassment and workplace mistreatment that stretches back 15 years. This could ultimately mean a change in ownership. Caleb, is Daniel Snyder going to get a Donald Sterling type of ultimatum?
No. It's just not the NBA. It's the NFL we're talking about. I mean, what is Robert Kraft going through right now? I mean, doesn't he have some serious personal allegations, not just organization allegations? Last I checked, nobody's questioning whether he should be the owner of the Patriots. So, no, I don't think he's going to get a Donald Sterling type of ultimatum where he has to give up his team or anything like that. It's just the culture of the NFL. I mean, we talked when Ray Rice and the video of Ray Rice came out, and, everybody was appalled at the NFL's response there. To domestic violence against women. And, they thought it was a ridiculous thing that 2 games suspension was the original punishment the NFL handed out. And then, of course, Ray Rice was exited from the NFL. And there was this whole push for the NFL to have a more respectful culture when it comes to their female employees and the way they treated women and the reflection of how women are treated in the workplace and at home and the misogynistic culture that existed in football at the time. And the NFL made promises then about how they would change that perception and that culture and how we viewed women and respected women in society. That was years ago. And since then, you've had other incidents where females were disrespected in the workplace or, in the NFL culture, and it continued to happen. So now, because this comes out, I don't think Snyder will be forced to do anything about it, his team or anything like that. I think it's just another black mark on how the NFL operates. And like going to the Redskins in general, how the Redskins were operating, they didn't have an HR department. Like what kind of organization do you know that doesn't have an HR department?
Especially
like,
a $1 billion
$1 corporation that
Yeah.
isn't like if you're the NFL and you're saying we're gonna change the culture. You said this years ago. Like I said with the Ray Rice, you said we're gonna change the culture and how we respect women in the workplace, how we hold our women to a respected standard in the workplace. If you're gonna say that and then allow one of your franchises who's already been in the spotlight, this is not the first time they've had incidents like this or where their culture has been in question in DC. But you're going to allow that team to not have an HR department? Like, how can you allow that as the NFL and then expect me to believe anything you say about changing the culture of teams and organizations everywhere? It's just, I mean, I hate to say it, but I don't think anything's going to happen to Dan Snyder. Well, it's just not the way the NFL operates.
And the thing is, there's a long storied history with this franchise.
Right.
It's not just Daniel Snyder. It goes back to their original owner, what was his name, Marshall, who they had to remove the statue of outside RFK Stadium. The last team in the NFL to integrate players.
Yeah.
I mean,
When Jack Kent Cook owned the team, they were successful. They were winning games.
Jack Kent Cook was also a Hollywood guy, so he probably had a little bit of a different mentality.
He did.
Daniel Snyder comes from.
He was known as a good guy.
Well, who, Jack Kent Cook?
Yeah.
I mean, the team was winning Super Bowls. They were run by Joe Gibbs, who was a class guy. I mean, Joe Gibbs, look at how successful he is. The guy leaves the NFL, goes to NASCAR, and he's one of the most successful owners in NASCAR. So, I mean, that says a lot about Joe Gibbs and the organization at that point.
But there's been a change since, without question.
Daniel Snyder, if you look at his track record, and I know that some of the things he's done aren't related to the culture of what's going on, but remember he was charging fans to go to training camp?
Yeah. There's no question he's an ass, but my point is you can't compare this to Robert Kraft. And the reason I say that is Robert Kraft was an individual thing on him.
Well, this is my thing.
And it's outside of football. This is within the organization, sexual harassment, where it is something where you have to take a look 15 years and even the one girl that did speak out, or that we're familiar with, the marketing coordinator, the former marketing coordinator, she said, I can't implicate Daniel Snyder, but it's hard to believe he didn't know what was going on. The few times he was in the building, he'd be in his office, you could hear, she's like, it was like a commonplace thing that went on.
And so the only
How
thing,
don't they make a change, Caleb? Come on.
The reason I compared it to Robert Kraft is because you're talking about the NFL as an organization and where they stand as far as these issues go. And they've proven that they will not remove an owner from his position based on any kind of inappropriate behavior.
Getting a rub and a tug is a lot different.
So Donald Sterling, you talk about Sterling, like what happened with him in the NBA, he was having a private conversation with his girlfriend about his personal beliefs and what he didn't want his girlfriend to do.
But
right?
you have him.
So that he then was forcibly removed, basically.
But you
from
have
his
him
team.
making racial statements to his girlfriend. Robert Kraft, you have doing what a lot of people do
is illegal. Doing something that's illegal.
It's illegal. I agree.
So this is what I'm saying. The NFL, when you talk about what they care about as far as the political correctness or the individual merit or the personal bias that somebody has, the NFL doesn't care. They're about making them. They're a business that's about making their money. The NBA is different. The NBA was able to put pressure.
This is egg in the face of the NFL if they don't do something. We've got the Wiz on the phone in the other room, and I know he's got a strong opinion. He feels Daniel Snyder will be removed from his or asked to give up ownership of the Washington Redskins. The minority owners have already said they want to sell their stock in the Redskins. I mean, this is really bad. Wiz, what do you got in there? Why do you think Daniel Snyder's gone?
I don't think he's necessarily gone, but I know he's going to do everything not to sell a team. It's going to make too much money, and there's obviously going to be a lot. As bad as it is to have to change your name and to rebrand, I just also think that brings in a lot of money. And someone who, when you're that rich, I mean, money is a big part of your life, and the idea that he's just going to give it up without a fight, as long as the NFL doesn't say he has to, he's staying right there in that seat.
I think I hear what you're saying, and I thought you had a stronger. Well, the other day you felt a little bit differently, and you've kind of swayed a little bit. I agree with you both in the fact that I don't think it's going to be a forced thing like with Dan. With Donald Sterling, it was like you're done. I don't think it's going to be like that, but I think there is going to be behind the scenes pressure for Daniel Snyder to sell this organization.
I don't think so.
There's such a history franchise. They're already having all these problems where they've got to change their name. Now that's been kind of put put on the back burner. They're going to be the Washington nobodies start the season if they don't start thinking about what they're going to change their name and logo to.
I don't think he sells a team. I don't think he's forced to, because I feel like this is a. Remember, there was a situation in the NBA a couple of years ago with Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks, and very similar toxic culture. Mark Cuban wasn't forced out. And like Caleb alluded to, this is the NFL.
He got 15 different
Yeah, but there was
out.
remember, there was the CEO of the Mavericks. She stepped away because of all of this stuff. Mark Cuban's advice to Daniel Snyder was own it, accept it, and make changes. Mark Cuban has done a lot of good things. They donated $10 million to women's charities following all this stuff. Daniel Snyder needs to follow the same path. I don't think he's going to be forced to sell. I don't think he will sell. He's too much of a pig-headed idiot to...
Well, he loves being the owner of the Washington Redskins.
The thing about it, a lot of these owners do. They take
do.
these NFL. It's like their pride and joy. Like, it's a hobby for sure. That these are rich tycoons that have their own money
the hobby
elsewhere.
means everything.
But it means everything, absolutely. Yeah. And when you're saying force him out, Roger Goodell, number one, works for the team owners. He's not, the governing body of necessarily the owners of these teams. He can do whatever he wants. He has free reign to do whatever he wants to the players.
Works for the team owners
and
too.
But it's the thing. Adam Silver has a separate agenda, and that the way the NBA operates is more of this type of issue is something that is more of a publicity issue, a PR issue that the NBA takes more seriously. The NFL owners are not concerned with what you think about what they do. And that if anybody was going to be forced out, you would have thought that Robert Kraft would have been. During his whole scandal, when that first blew up, and it kind of just got forgotten about, and the Patriots went on to go to Super Bowls and things like that, and people didn't even talk about it anymore. And that's the way the NFL operates. The owners are in absolute control of what goes on, and it's evident throughout the history of the NFL. The owners are untouchable, and that's the culture that they've created.
Well, the Patriots, though, granted, Dallas has the moniker of America's team, but over the past decade and a half, 2 decades, the Patriots have kind of formed into America's team. It's a little bit different. The Washington Redskins have had egg on their face for years now, and Daniel Snyder is constantly making the news for being cheap, being abrasive, being a pain in the ass. This is who the guy is.
So Robert Kraft got caught. Okay, that's the one thing.
I agree with that. It's a fact.
I'm not going to pretend that the NFL owners are squeaky clean and they've been doing things perfectly fine and legally and non-discriminatory practices. I'm not going to pretend that that's the reality. I understand that just because you don't get caught doesn't mean stuff's not happening, right? And things could have been happening in all these other organizations and just not getting blown out. Maybe women didn't step forward. Maybe massage parlors didn't have cameras set up.
What about the allegations that they were using cheerleaders to take out season ticket holders?
Yeah, did
Daniel Snyder have a part
You're going to tell me that the Redskins are the only team that's done that? You're going to tell me that people weren't. You're going to tell me that Jerry Jones hasn't explored the possibility, at least, of using his cheerleaders, the cheerleaders that are employed by the Dallas Cowboys, because everybody loves the Cowgirls. If he hasn't used the Cowgirls in a manner in which you could say was the same as the Redskins.
Well, they had a reality show about the Dallas Cowboys.
So this is what I'm saying. So it's just a matter of who's willing to speak out on things, who's willing to call it unacceptable at the right time. The Redskins, of course, have been called out on it, but you're going to talk about has it happened in other places? I'm sure it has. Absolutely.
Well, then I guarantee you, or I can't guarantee it, but I believe if it is happening in other places, why wouldn't other women start speaking out at other organizations now saying, hey, this is it because they like their job? I mean, this woman that spoke out said she hated her job. Driving to work every morning was like a chore, and every evening was crying her way home. I don't know that was exaggerated.
And that's the culture that we've created, where a woman who has made it to the pinnacle of her career, you talk about like a journalist, for instance, or anybody in management who has made it to become a key member or an important member of an NFL franchise, right? That is a dream job for a lot of people. You get to that point, and because somebody is harassing you, if you're able to suck it up and deal with it and just bottle it up and go home every day and continue, you're going to do that, because I shouldn't have to be afraid to give up my career that I've worked my butt off for just because some jerk's harassing me at work. So me speaking out, oftentimes for women in America and this culture that we've created, women speaking out means they get eliminated, they get fired, so why should they have to sacrifice their career for speaking out? Some women, I will give them credit for. I will absolutely applaud how tough they are and the things they're able to deal with in the workplace, especially. So I'm not going to act like it hasn't happened to some women just because they haven't spoken out. Yeah, maybe they haven't spoken out because they like their job, they want to keep their position. And so that's maybe a reason why they don't say anything. So just because they haven't said anything doesn't mean it's not something that happens everywhere. The Redskins, the team in D.C., I'm trying not to call them Redskins anymore, but the team in D.C., they have been on the bubble. Snyder's been in the news. All these things have happened. There's been a culture that has been so toxic that women couldn't put up with it. And they spoke out about it. And that's where we're at now. You think people didn't know that Robert Kraft was getting rubbing tugs at that massage parlor?
I'm sure they knew.
So this is the thing. You think like Jerry Jones doesn't have skeletons in his closet that people know about, but
couple
just won't
Dallas
come?
cheerleaders in his closet.
Yeah, like these things. It's something that happens, and just because we don't expose it all the time doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But we've created a culture, especially in the NFL, where it's protect the shield. Everything behind the NFL is, if you do it behind that moniker, you're protected because you got this fraternity of rich, powerful owners who will come to your aid and defend you and make sure all these things disappear. So that's kind of the culture that the NFL has.
We have, but there has been mud in the face. Who was it years ago? Ben Coates, I think, that had the problem in the locker room for the Patriots years ago with some female.
Well, you could go back to Victor Kayem, who was the former owner of the Patriots, and he was not a good guy at all. I mean, he definitely was. I'm trying to think of the word. I mean, old school probably isn't the word.
No, it's not.
He was a degenerate scumbag. Yes, I hate to say it because he's dead, but I mean, if you look at the stuff that went on when Victor Kayem owned the Patriots, yikes.
No, it was bad news, and but I do believe something like this will hopefully alter the culture of the NFL overall in teams, because now it's going to be more looked at. And again, we'll see in the near future, because usually when something like this happens, other people come forward. And if this is happening at other franchises, I think we'll start hearing a little bit more about it. I agree, though, Caleb. People don't want to lose their careers. Yeah. And this is a big thing.
It's a cutthroat industry.
But the point is, even at the collegiate level, there's been a lot of issues with this. You played college football. I know there's usually always female trainers for UNLV. Were they harassed, honestly?
You could point to, and what you define as harassment may differ, because it gets to a level of what somebody accepts.
We call it flirting.
Inappropriate behavior that maybe would be suggestive, and yes, in some cases, just flat out harassment. Like, that girl doesn't want you to be talking to her like that, and you could see it, and it's uncomfortable. And for the most part in my career at UNLV, it didn't happen. It wasn't like an issue with trainers and feeling uncomfortable and guys coming after them or touching inappropriate things like that. It was a flirty guys talking to girls talking back to guys type of situation. But there was
that's natural, and I think it happens everywhere.
And there was just a connection there because of the relationship between a trainer and training staff and players. So it was never, and what I witnessed was never anything inappropriate where a woman felt like she was being attacked. But I could easily see how that interaction in the locker room could be seen as inappropriate, unacceptable, and things like that.
Absolutely.
And you're forced into that situation. Like, players, maybe a guy doesn't want to be put in that situation, and I'm not making an excuse for him, but maybe that's just how he is. That's how he acts with women. It's not right.
Well,
but then because some woman is forced because of her job, because of her internship as a trainer, now she has to talk to this guy and tape his ankle or whatever the case may be, and he's acting the same old way towards her. It's not professional. It's not appropriate, and I think it happens more often than we'd like to accept.
Right. But
it does happen.
And that goes without saying. I mean, you're dealing with gigantic egos in a lot of cases. And I mean,
football players are the worst.
What girl wouldn't want me? And that's the thought process of it all. I do think we will see a cultural change with the Washington Redskins. Maybe Daniel Snyder will maintain ownership of the team, but I think we will see some changes in place, and they will make these changes very visible
like
for
an
the
HR
public.
team.
Like hiring an HR department might be a good way to start. Caleb, something I know you feel very strongly about with the NBA getting ready to start up at the end of the month. The last survivor of the Big Six civil rights activists, a group led by the late, great Martin Luther King, died Friday. Of course, I'm speaking of Congressman John Lewis.
Yeah.
He was 80 years old. He's had a long battle with pancreatic cancer, but he is one of the most courageous individuals the civil rights movement ever produced. A sad day for our country. And this guy, I mean, me being just a little tiny bit older than you, I do know some of the history of John Lewis. But in all seriousness, what an impactful human being. If you don't know this guy, please educate yourself. Caleb's spoken a lot about, the biggest problem is probably the lack of education. John Lewis, to me, is one of the greatest civil rights activists, not just to me, to everybody out there. Actually, when Martin Luther King gave his famous speech where I Have a Dream, John Lewis spoke before him. He was a huge part of these movements and has been so, spent many of his years in politics and has always been at the forefront of being a civil rights activist and has never been soft-spoken. He lived an amazing life, and 80 years is a long time. And again, it's pancreatic cancer that took him, but what an influential guy in this country and for all of us in general.
No doubt. It definitely hits home for a lot of people who are involved and engaged with civil rights activism and the movement for justice and equality for all on a racial division topic in this country. So Lewis was, and for me, he put it in perspective a lot. And as I started to educate myself, and when I started learning about, the civil rights issues and the history of this country, him being a congressman, a sitting congressman, when I first, started really diving into this in my adult life, put in perspective how long ago this was. And by long, I mean not long at all. So in his lifetime, he was an adult man when Martin Luther King, and I think people don't realize Martin Luther King would still be alive today, barring some health issue or something like that. His age he would be alive right with Lewis,
no question.
Right? So it puts it in perspective because when you talk about Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy and the 60s, for a lot of people today, that seems like such a distant history because of the way we learned it from textbooks, because these people don't exist, and they haven't existed for Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, these people that were civil rights activists. Lewis put it in perspective to me of how far we've come in such a short time, how recent in our history the struggle for civil rights was. And you're talking about the most developed country in the world. And that recently in our history, men weren't looked at as men. And in Lewis's lifetime, he was not considered a full man. He was considered 3/5 of a man. He was not allowed to vote. He was discriminated against in housing practices. He was discriminated against with whether or not he was protected in the workplace in the 60s. And this is what he was an adult experiencing and going through and protesting against in that time. So seeing him alive and giving speeches on the Congress floor and speaking in Congress about things really put it in perspective to me that we are not that far removed from that period in time. And the way I learned it as a child, I learned this was a distant memory. Like, it's not like this anymore. It's peaches and roses. This was so long ago. It was like yesterday. When you're talking about the historical context, this was yesterday. And Lewis was one of the primary examples of that, where he was directly connected to the struggle. So hearing him speak always was more powerful to me than anything because he was there. He lived it. He walked it. He talked it. He preached it. He gave speeches on it right next to Martin Luther King, who we uphold as a historical, in a historic context. It was yesterday, and that's what Lewis was. So when he passed, it's who's going to pick up the torch and carry that and be that connection to our recent history and continue the fight. And so people everywhere, like I said, who are involved in civil rights and activism and education, losing him was really sad. And like you said, it was a long battle with age and with cancer. It's a struggle, and you kind of see it coming. It's going to happen. We get it, but it still hurts to see this guy go away and what he meant to the country for the better of the country. It's a devastating loss to me.
Yeah, a devastating loss to us all. And again, kind of when you talk about an unsung hero, as you mentioned, Martin Luther King, historically known by everybody and by all, and yet John Lewis stood right next to him. And after Martin Luther King tragically was assassinated, John Lewis carried the torch.
Yeah.
And I don't think history recognizes him as fully as they should. And,
right.
And when he passed, right away, I'm like, oh my God, that's a tragedy. I knew about the cancer, but yet, like I said, historically, I think more people need to educate themselves on what a great man this was for our society. And the fight continues with what he's created to this day. And just a sad loss. A lot of the NBA players, Doc Rivers, spoke out about it yesterday, and it was really, really cool to see up there in the bubble in Orlando as they get ready for an NBA season that it seems imminent. And one of the things, and we'll talk about this too, is we're going to take a break in about a minute here. After the break, we're going to have Gary Lawless on, the Vegas Golden Knights insider. But later on, I want to speak about the NBA and as they get closer to the season. And one of the things that I kind of think is an injustice, and I want to get your take on that, and Mags as well. I don't like giving away NBA awards that are the season ended 4 months ago. And, now there's this big debate. Rookie of the year, I think, to me is pretty obvious. And I also think defensive player of the year, there's two guys I think in mind for that, but when it comes to MVP, it's Giannis or LeBron. There's no question it's one of the two. The numbers would favor Giannis, and we're going to talk about this later, so I'll get your opinion. Just food for thought for everyone out there, but I really want you to think about it and Caleb will like this because LeBron now being an LA Laker, but there is nobody that does more to win for his team than LeBron James. And if you look at the very last couple of games before the pandemic,
the two versus Milwaukee and the Clippers.
I mean, he played he defended Giannis the entire game, and he defended Kawhi for at least half of the game. Yep. He did a great job, but offensively, he was still a monster against both of them. So the point is, head to head, who's the best player in the NBA? Come on, guys. It's LeBron James. We'll talk about that a little bit later. On the other side of the break, we have Gary Lawless, Vegas Golden Knights insider, joining us for Nightcap. And again, we've got a goalie battle going down at City National Arena that will carry on into the playoffs. Marc-Andre Fleury, Robin Lehner, who is going to be in net? It's going to be Marc-Andre Fleury, but we'll talk about that after the break.
Hockey players, as you know, are warriors. They don't give up. They come to play every game.
It's time for Nightcap, a cupful of the Vegas Golden Knights. From highlights to interviews to special events, the puck starts here.
Yeah, Vegas Golden Knights are in camp. They are at City National Arena on a daily basis, doing virtual interviews and all that stuff. A few select members of the media are allowed in, but it has been quite a battle the first couple of practices. Marc-Andre Fleury wasn't there for the very beginning of camp, but he has showed up, him and Robin Lehner at either end of the floor, and pretty crazy. I thought the floor, I should say the ice, but pretty amazing. These two guys going head to head, and you were talking about two of the quality goaltenders in the National Hockey League playing on the same team now, and what a luxury for the Vegas Golden Knights. So I don't know what that sound is. Spence, you got to turn that off. We've got a serious echo going on. I don't know what that is. But joining us right now on the Fox Sports Residential Bancorp studio line, Vegas Golden Knights insider Gary Lawless. Gary has seen this team from the inception, the shocking first season that we all enjoyed so thoroughly out here in Las Vegas, to this season where they were putting on quite a run. Heading into the pandemic and looking like one of the best teams in the National Hockey League. And then, of course, tragedy struck us all, and we have had a long delay, and now we're back, and we're less than a week away from the Vegas Golden Knights departing for Edmonton, where they will play their postseason. And Gary Lawless joining the show now. Appreciate you joining us early morning on a Sunday, Gary.
Glad to be here. Just having my coffee before I drive to the rink for practice.
Speaking of the practice, Marc-Andre Fleury wasn't there right at the beginning of camp, but he showed up, and it's amazing, like mid-season form, no pun intended, and Robin Lehner the same way. You got these guys on either end of the ice, and they're not letting pucks go in the net in practice. How cool is it to watch this battle for the goaltender position? We know it's Fleury's, but I think Robin Lehner's going to play a big part.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. The entire Golden Knights team stayed in Vegas for throughout the pandemic. So phase two, Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner, they were on the ice every day. So Fleury has been, he's been skating and taking shots for 6 weeks. He took a few days off this week for what Pete DeBoer termed as maintenance, but he's seen a ton of ice and a ton of pucks over the last 2 months. So no surprise that the two of them are in excellent form. And DeBoer was asked about the goaltending situation the other day, and he said, I haven't made any decisions, and I'm going to keep a really open mind. It's pretty fascinating to hear goalies around the NHL talk about this event, and that is the story. Like, there's 12 of the 24 teams in the Stanley Cup playoffs that have not determined who their starting goalie is, and Vegas is in that group. Pete DeBoer is going to, starting goalie might be a bit of a misnomer because, I don't expect DeBoer to go straight rotation, but I'd be really surprised if both guys don't play in every series. Listen, maybe if they sweep somebody, it's just one goalie, or if they get swept, it's just one goalie. Actually, if they get swept, there certainly would be two goalies. But I think this is an open competition right now, and I really think that DeBoer is going to kind of go with the hot hand. You win tonight, you're back in. Oh, you lost? Okay, we're going to go with the other guy. And listen, I don't think it'll be a coin flip for a Game 7 situation, but this isn't a decision that's just going to get made once. I think this is something that DeBoer he's got an advantage. He's got two of the best goalies in the NHL, and he's going to use them.
I'm excited about seeing them play out, and I think you're exactly right. They get to a Game 7, who's ever the hottest goaltender's going to be in net. It starts a week from Thursday, and that is July 30th. They'll be playing Arizona in the one exhibition game they have, and then Monday, August 3rd, it all gets started with round-robin Game 1 playing the Dallas Stars. How exciting. I mean, unfortunate that we have this type of format and we're forced into this in the middle of the summer, but really, when you look at it, a pretty exciting format, Gary.
Oh, this is incredible. It's going to be sort of a March Madness version of the Stanley Cup to the point where, yesterday, the broadcasters, we were all at the rink watching practice, and we're trying to figure out, hey, where we're going to sit when the games start, and because we'd be in the office preparing for calling the next Golden Knights game, but there'll be 5 games on the television that day, and we've convinced team president Kerry Bubbles to give us the boardroom, the main boardroom with a big 70-inch screen. So we have our own viewing room all set up at City National Arena.
That's pretty cool. What about now? What are you hearing about Edmonton? There's going to be a limited number of media like at every single professional sporting event. How are you hearing they're going to be monitoring that with all these teams going to be there and of course, a lot of media as well?
Well, the media will have no access to the players. They're not in the same hotel as the players. They have to quarantine for 14 days because it's Canada. So if you want to go to Canada right now, if you have, first of all, it's hard to get into Canada, but if you have work reason to get to Canada and they let you over the border, the first thing you have to do is go to your hotel room and stay there for 14 days. So that's a lot of media are there now, have already got to Edmonton and are in their hotel rooms, I guess, living on room service right now. And then once the games start, they'll go to Rogers Place in Edmonton and in Toronto to Scotiabank Arena. They'll go in different entrances than the players. They'll go to an area way up, either the press box or a suite, a luxury suite, and they'll be ensconced there and they'll stay there. And then when the game is over, they'll get Zoom chat opportunities, and then they'll have to leave and go back to go back to their hotel or wherever they want to go. But they'll have no access to the players. So it is a limited amount because they don't want that many in the rink, but they will never be on the E level where the players are.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. The 12 participating Eastern Conference teams will play at Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, as Gary just mentioned, while the 12 participating Western Conference teams will be playing at Rogers Place in Edmonton, which is where the Vegas Golden Knights will be. And one of the things that they're having trouble with in the bubble, which we already figured with NBA players, is a couple of guys escaping their quarantine, so to speak, guys like Dwight Howard. Is there any penalty if somebody gets caught not following quarantine rules among the players? How do they police that, Gary?
Well, Gary Bettman has already they haven't publicized the exact numbers, but they have let the teams all know if one of your players breaks the quarantine. There's a number of things. First of all, 6-figure fine, potential loss of draft pick, and if they endanger the tournament, I would imagine the team could be disqualified. This is a huge undertaking for the NHL. Hundreds of millions of dollars to put this event on. They're not going to let one player ruin it because he wants a burger from a different place or he wants to go meet some friends for a beer somewhere outside of the bubble. That's just, first of all, the players will police it, and they will not want that embarrassment or that stigma. One of the Vancouver Canucks was seen outside of the bubble in Vancouver. There was a huge backlash in that city. You have to also understand that in the media in Canada, the way they are looking at COVID as a country, they've handled it in a much different fashion than the United States, and they've flattened the curve. Like, some provinces just haven't had a new case in 2 weeks, not one new case in 2 weeks, and there is a huge public focus on this. And if a player gets seen outside the bubble, the backlash in the media and society in Canada will be massive. You'd be taking a huge risk to break the bubble in Canada.
I see that because the Toronto Blue Jays are still looking for a home. They're not letting people cross borders, and they're very adamant about that, so it makes sense. He's Gary Lawless, Vegas Golden Knights insider. Gary, before I let you go, what is it going to take, aside from obviously stellar goaltending, which it always takes to get through the Stanley Cup playoff tournament? But besides that, what is it going to take for the Vegas Golden Knights to pull this off and get back to the Stanley Cup Finals and maybe even win the thing?
Well, health, I think, is so critical in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think Vegas has an advantage going in. I think the organization and the plan that they put together from the very start of this is superior. I think Vegas is probably right now clicking and executing it with more pace than anybody else in the NHL, and that's a hard statement to back up because I haven't seen everybody else, but just the way watching them and the high level they're at, but they're going to have to increase that level. That's it's great to be running on all cylinders when you first get there, but everybody else is going to catch up, and you're going to need to keep raising your level as a team. So if they can stay healthy and continue to get better, Vegas is certainly a contender. They are in my top, if I had to pick 5 teams that I thought that could win the Stanley Cup, Vegas is certainly in that top 5.
I would agree with you 100%. I think we saw them really playing well before we ended up going away for a while, and hopefully they'll come back and doing the same thing. It's going to be exciting, as like you said, it's almost a March Madness type of atmosphere, probably some of the most exciting hockey that we are going to see. And to see it in midsummer, it's going to be different, but boy, are we craving sports. And I know here in Vegas, desperately craving hockey. We're about to see it. Gary Lawless, Vegas Golden Knights insider, greatly appreciate you joining the show. Take care and be safe, my friend.
Thanks very much for having me. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Once again, Gary Lawless, Vegas Golden Knights insider. You'll get to see him all over the broadcasts as the Vegas Golden Knights get ready for play again. They start play officially in Edmonton. They will be at Rogers Place, and that will be Thursday, July 30th versus the Arizona Coyotes. And then it all begins Monday, August the 3rd. They play the Dallas Stars in the round-robin Game 1. It is going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it tonight. Chris, you got to be looking forward to it as well, man. The time is here, and whether they finish or not, I don't know, but I think it's almost imminent. They're definitely going to start. I
think they'll finish. I mean, I feel like once they get to Edmonton, things will be fine there. I don't foresee a lot of guys leaving the bubble, getting into trouble. I just don't think that's going to happen. Done here in the States, cost Vegas the chance to have the games here, but nonetheless, they are going to start, and I do believe they'll finish. I feel like once they get up there, things will be fine. It's exciting. I was out of practice for the first time yesterday. I hadn't gone all week. Me and Ryan have kind of been, only one of us is gone. I've let him go during the week and let him spend the time with his family on the weekend. So I'll be out there tonight as well, or today, I should say. They look good. I'll tell you what, they look really focused. I haven't seen them this focused. You talk to the guys during the week. We hear Mark Stone, who is, I feel like, has asserted himself as the leader of this team. Mm-hmm. He is now the guy who is going to put the team on his back and carry them. Even some of the younger guys.
I think his line mate, Max Pacioretty, will have something to say about that as well.
And I just want to put this out. Patrick Brown is not a guy that a lot of fans know. He only played a couple games up here. He spent most of the season in the AHL. His wife works in a hospital in New York City. So when all this was going down and the AHL season was canceled, Patrick picked up in Chicago and moved all his stuff to New York City to be with his family. And he was talking about how stressful it was and how difficult it was to balance. You know, hockey was secondary to him, and I feel like it was to a lot of people. And you know, his wife is a hero, and I have no problem saying that. If you're a nurse or a doctor and you're working on the front lines of this, you are a hero. And Patrick Brown's wife, she's a hero.
She's right there. Yeah.
She's clearly an amazing human being.
She is. I'm saying my dad. My dad has been my hero my whole life. And right now, after getting COVID-19 at 82 years old, he is back in his office 3 days a week taking care of people. Absolutely amazing to me. And Chris, I want to take a break. But before I do, final question. I was going to ask this to Gary because it was a text question. Is Peter DeBoer the guy? And are you happy the Vegas Golden Knights made the change?
Well, I don't ever want to say I'm happy about a guy losing his job because
I didn't ask you that. Not about losing his job.
I really liked Gerard Gallant. I feel like the team maybe needed a change. Pete DeBoer seems like he's got a little more personality. I feel like the team was playing extremely well under Pete DeBoer, and that's not to diminish the job that Gerard Gallant did, but let's be honest. You know as well as I do the shelf life of a hockey coach in the NHL does not last very long. I feel like the team felt they needed to go in a different direction.
You make the Stanley Cup Finals, and 2 years later, you're fired in mid-season. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
I will say this. I'm not a fan, so no, I'm not happy about the change, but I will say I feel like it was the right move.
Well, you know what I will say?
Looking back, hindsight's 2020. At the time, I was not happy with the decision, but looking back, I feel like they made the right decision.
I'm not going to say they didn't. And the one thing about Peter DeBoer, remember I said this, when he lies, his nose turns red. So you'll always know. All right, listen, we're going to take a break. On the other side of the break, we've got S&B with C coming up. And as I mentioned, want to talk a little bit about baseball. The Toronto Blue Jays looking for a home. They've got 3 options. We know what 2 of them are. How about the third one? I've got an interesting thought about that. We'll be right back. About 9 minutes in front of the hour of 9 o'clock. It is the Sunday before the start of Major League Baseball season, which is going to begin this Thursday. The Yankees will take on the Nationals. That's at 7 o'clock. And you got Cole going against Scherzer. Scherzer getting a little beaten up yesterday in preseason debut. Bryce Harper banged a big home run off him.
What did Scherzer give up 7 runs?
Yeah, 7 runs. Looking a little rusty. And the Giants are playing the L.A. Dodgers. Giants, of course, without Baumgartner, who is
member of the D-backs.
A Diamondback now. Yeah. So that the Diamondbacks all of a sudden became a very interesting baseball team that could make some noise and are one of actually the favorites to potentially get to the postseason. 60-game sprint, man. It's going to be awful exciting. And what's exciting is the Toronto Blue Jays don't have a place to play. And as of right now, the Blue Jays say they have 3 options. Number 1 is Buffalo, New York. It's at Salem Field. The problem is that the lighting in the outfield is substandard when it comes to making it look like a good TV product, and the clubhouses are small. And, of course, the Blue Jays are worried about social distancing inside the small clubhouses. Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're worried about social distancing.
And number 2 is this is the plug-and-play option, which is down in Dunedin. What is it? Dunedin? How do you pronounce it?
Dunedin.
Dunedin, Florida, right? Yeah. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's where they hold their spring training, and everything is taken care of there. They know that they have the right facilities. The problem, of course, is the outbreaks of the coronavirus in Florida have been much more significant, and there's the fear over that. And then there's the third option. Blue Jays president Mark Shapiro alluded to a potential third site, but hasn't gone into any details about where the site is. The bottom line, 10 days from the Blue Jays home opener, and they have no idea where it's going to be right now. Why not the Las Vegas ballpark?
Because no. Las Vegas isn't like not a hot spot. I mean, you're talking about Florida.
Compared to a lot of other places, Vegas is surprisingly lower numbers. You've got a miniature version of a major league ballpark, the nicest AAA facility in the country.
You just want any kind of sport up the street.
I'm just saying it's an option because you've got Red Rock Casino right there. They can walk across the street to the ballpark.
You know what doesn't have in common with the rest of the numbers or the rest of the options? It's not on the East Coast.
It doesn't matter.
About across the country.
But wait a minute. You got to remember something. Once upon a time, Vegas was the AAA franchise of the Toronto Blue Jays.
But it's not the same as being the AAA, the Blue Jays.
I would love to have it here in Vegas. The problem is the way they've set the schedule up. Everything is pretty regional.
Yeah.
And
It'd be ridiculous.
I mean, I'm sure there's places on the East Coast they can do it. I would imagine Buffalo will probably end up being the place. I mean, It seems like it's the
Deal with
safest.
the little clubhouses, guys. Come on.
And the
here's
TV
the
can
thing,
get
it's not
enough
like-
light for the outfield.
figure it out.
It's not
Come
like
on,
it's not like
people.
there's not going to be. It's not like there's going to be fans. I mean, they could put
Right.
guys dressing
But
rooms.
Buffalo
in like,
is on
you
the
know,
Canadian border, so at least it's close to Canada.
Yeah, I think it's only
Right.
about an hour away.
Oh, from Toronto, yeah. So I mean, that does make the most sense. But of course, they're going to complain about social
We don't have
distancing.
social-
And
Yeah.
what are you doing in the dugout? Are you 6 feet away from
Yeah.
each other? Please, people. One other thing, real quick about Major League Baseball before we get to S&B was Freddie Freeman. I don't know if you've seen. He's back playing with the Braves now. And yesterday he talked about the coronavirus. I didn't get the sound of that. I meant to, but. I was up too late last night. But the whole thing I will tell you about Freddie Freeman that time, he said at one point he was running a 104.5 degree fever. And he basically said it was like death warned over him. And he said that he's not a praying man, but he actually prayed for his life, that he was actually in fear for it, that it was that bad. So again, those of you that think it's minor, you don't want to get this thing still please practice social distancing and all that stuff. And Major League Baseball, for all practical purposes, begins first major sport to take the field in regular season games, and that is going to be this Thursday evening. So pretty interesting. Check it out. Yankees, Nationals, Giants, and the Dodgers, and of course preseason games on tonight and all that. And I'm actually watching them just because it's something to watch. Also pretty cool seeing Tiger Woods back on the golf course.
Yeah.
Didn't play very well yesterday. I don't know how well he'll play today.
He's one over
He
right
made
now.
he made the cut. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
bottom line. He did make the cut. He's back in it, and pretty cool. And also Justin Thomas, his caddy had some issues, and his dad took over his bag
Which is
late in the
cool.
thing, which
It's
I
cool.
thought was really
Yeah.
kind. He turned around, and all of a sudden there's his dad on the bag. That's pretty cool. Listen, almost out of time, Caleb. I want to get to S&B with C is the NFL. We talked about the Redskins, obviously, and eminent that they will be changing their name. And I should say the Redskins anymore, like you said, that Washington team. But other than that, we still have the Raiders. We still have Allegiant Stadium, and it seems like business as usual for the NFL.
Yeah, so July 28th, the Raiders are expected to open up camp for NFL training camp. That's when they're supposed to be allowed to. The NFL and the NFLPA have started to get closer to an agreement as far as how things will work during the season when the season does kick off. Most of the procedures they're going on right now are kind of centered around travel, like how teams will be allowed to accommodate travel. Basically, when you do travel, you'll be isolated to a bubble, which is the hotel facility, certain amount of buses and things like that. One of the things for the Raiders, of course, the Allegiant Stadium is the newest shiny new toy in the NFL. And a lot of team owners and franchises have been coming out with plans to reduce seating and capacity, not necessarily saying no fans at all, but 20% capacity, things like that. They've been throwing out. Some teams have agreed to and submitted their plans to have reduced capacity. The Raiders have not. It seems they're trying to hold out as long as possible to avoid having to refund all those season tickets that were bought for Allegiant Stadium. So they haven't yet made a decision. You remember, the Raiders were the only team to cast a no vote for the 8 rows of seating were advertising signs. Everybody else in the NFL ownership basically said, yeah, we'll sell those first 8 rows for advertising and having banners on those 8 rows. The Raiders were the only team that said no, because it's important to them to get people in the seats, to have those season ticket holders have their seats honored. And not have to refund that money, especially with
The
Allegiant
money.
Stadium.
There you go.
the
Let's
money.
talk about
That's
what it
the money.
really is.
So that's what the Raiders are going through right now. That's the hottest news. But like I said, July 28th, training camp's supposed to start. We'll see if we get to the football season and how normal it looks when it does start.
Well, you saw ESPN put out this week the new helmet mask they're going to have blocking
It's
their
like the
mouths.
Predator, man.
So yeah, it's pretty good. And I figured it's smart with the NFL. It's one of the sports you can actually do that. Put a mask over their faces, but you don't have to put a bib underneath them because your spit's going to still come down. Yeah. So, anyways, man, I want to thank Gary Lawless, Vegas Golden Knights insider, for joining the show today. Of course, thank my co-host Caleb Herring, Chris Magnum Chapman behind the wheels of steel, and of course, the Wiz. Can't forget our intern in the other room, social distancing in the green room, Spencer the Wiz Ostrovsky, also our social media director. Appreciate his work. I'm Brian Feldman. This is Out of Line. We're back next week. Definitely check out next week's show. We have something cool for you.